Hello there. My name is Ted Sass, Wilbert T. Sass, Omaha, Nebraska. And thank you for taking a few minutes to view my video. We found the beef. um, if you lived back in the 80s, the mid 80s, and you were aware of your surroundings, you probably heard the phrase, "Where's the beef?" There was a famous actress, or I don't know if she was famous, but she did a terrific job in presenting that ad campaign by one of the largest hamburger chains, franchise hamburger chains. And they were trying to point out that they had more beef, better beef, uh, fresher beef, whatever. And so by using that tagline, "Where's the beef?" that that's how they were, excuse me, attempting to set their hamburgers apart from all the other franchise hamburgers and other hamburgers available at independent hamburger places. So now, particularly myself, I really enjoy this particular franchise's hamburgers. I think they have excellent hamburgers, and the idea that they use fresh beef is a good idea too. So rather than the frozen. So uh, when I made the first video that's on my website, right above this one, it was an introductory type of video that attempted to signal a unique, exclusive, uh, asset based. I didn't mention that part in the other video up above this one, but it is a unique, exclusive, asset based, valued marketing, advertising, membership associates program for independent businesses. And I made a big deal out of the fact that it's got uh, two correlating elements that merge into the benefits of the asset value of the program. Now, the reason why I call it access value uh, or asset value access uh, business organization group, that's Avabog, and you'll see that brand design, Avabog, which is I think you call it a icon or synonym for, or maybe it's icon. It's words that mean asset value access business organization group. That's Avabog. And you can go avabog.com and get all of the information related to Avabog. But it's a tough slogan because there's one thing about a marketing plan and a business plan that I've learned over my 50 some years of selling, marketing, advertising, sales management, importing, franchise food operation sales, independent food operation ownership sales, uh, and just good old hard knocks of life. As one thing I've learned is if something is real simple to grasp and easy to grasp in terms of selling and marketing, it's easy to be copied, isn't it? In other words, and you see that going on all the time. And if your experience background is rather limited in its perspective, if you don't have a real solid historical background, uh, it's difficult to come up with interrelated circumstances that are embedded within a business plan. so that it unfolds with people in a way that makes them understand that this is something special. This is, in fact, in my case, it's unique. When I say unique in the other video up above this one, I said unique is used in a little bit different way than exclusive, because exclusive is the difference between uh, inclusive. And if it's not inclusive, then it's exclusive, and this is exclusive. But it's more than that. Okay, it's more than exclusive. Exclusive just means it's not inclusive, and there's a lot of exclusive things. But if you go a step higher, if you broaden it out in perspective from experience, and you say it's unique, now that means one of a kind. Okay, one copy. There's nothing like we found the beef. There's nothing like Avabog. There's nothing like Idea Grow USA. There's nothing like SiloPress 5. There's nothing like Bunk Bag. There's nothing like uh, 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 Import Group USA. And there's nothing like Progressive. Now listen real close to this one, because this is a kicker. Progressive cash coupon savings. Progressive or progressive savings coupon benefits. Okay. Now, you don't see that in coupons. Now, look, coupons is one of the is the largest form of advertising there is today, as far as the number of units that are pushed into the consumer environment. Okay, it's the largest by far. Um, and but if you notice on coupons, well, most of them, I think just about all of them, there's you see down in fine print on the coupon, this offer expires on such and such a date. Now, why do you suppose that's there? Well, I'll tell you why. Because there's a cost to offer that coupon to benefits. The company doesn't pay that. If you think the company pays for that benefit that you're getting on that coupon, then I got a bridge out in the desert I want to sell you. Because you got to understand something about advertising and marketing that companies do. You pay for all of it if you buy their products. They don't pay any of it. See, people got this idea that these companies are doing them such a good favor when they give them a deal. Well, the cost of any kind of a sale, the cost of it includes whatever the discount is. You see, that's when you start doing the analysis of the costs of this making the sale. When you get down the list there, you find out that whatever the discount was, that's included in the cost, and they took that cost and all added all the costs up and added it to the price they charged you, and then they put on a profit, and then they sold it to you, and you think you got a good deal. You see, now if you don't understand that, it's a good idea for you to give that some thought, because it'll help you out there in determining which businesses you're going to do business with. Okay. Because when anybody comes at you and tells you they got a better deal than anybody else, that's when you start looking underneath the mattress to see where the fleas are. Because there isn't anybody's got a better deal. Everybody, whatever the deals they're offering, is they're adding to your price, and you're paying the price. Whenever you spend any money, you're paying whatever the cost was associated with selling you that order or that deal, that product, that service. You paid all of it, every bit of it, because and plus a profit. Because the company can't stay in business unless they make a profit and consistently, and they can't stay in business unless that profit is exclusive. There's that word again, exclusive of any costs. Okay, because if the costs start watering down the profit, that's when you run into a situation where eventually one of the oldest retail brands in the United States just filed for bankruptcy a week ago, because they had too much cost related to the profit they were making, and the investors can't stand still for that because they got to have a return on their money. Okay, so but this is my business plan that I created, and we found the beef. We actually found the beef. Okay, and when I say we, I'm talking about Import Group USA, and I'm talking about Avabog. Okay, that's because Avabog is Import Group USA people are able to access the asset value of uh, of the uh, Idea Grow USA marketing exclusive marketing agreement, and how that marketing agreement in the USA, by the way, and how that marketing agreement is different from any other dealer program or any other distributor program or any other representative program or contract representative program is different from any of that stuff because all of those dealerships and distributorships and sales deals and employment and contracts for independents, all those are tied to some kind of a timeline and performance, but more importantly than performance, some kind of a timeline, some kind of an event that stops the agreement. Okay. So whatever benefit you've generated for the company that you have an agreement with, where you're dealing for them, or you're doing distributing for them, or you're performing services on a contract in return for commissions, whenever that timeline is triggered for whatever reasons outlined in the legal contract, whatever you've done before, you lost it all. The company picks it all up. It's they own it, you see, because they had a contract with you that didn't say what you were doing was yours forever. It just said they would pay you to do what you're doing for them at percentage as long as you performed in a certain way and blah, 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 and so on and so forth. But when that contract term limit came up, that's it. You get no more commission on anything you've ever sold before or any benefit you've ever created for the company before, unless there's some kind of after market, after contract agreement. And in most cases, there isn't. Uh, so, but in my contract that I have with Idea Grow in Columbia is a in perpetuity marketing contract for Silo Press. You understand what that means? In perpetuity? That means that the contract, and it also, the contract I have, and I'll publish the contract online so you can see it. Let an attorney look at it. I wrote the contract. I wasn't about to go to some attorney and pay them hundreds of dollars or whatever they wanted to write my contract, because it was simple and straightforward. And I made the agreement with Idea Grow that was approved by the Idea Grow in Columbia board of directors, according to the managing director, which he stated so in an email to me that I have a record of. That the board approved it, and he had a green light to make the deal with me and to start the selling in the United States. So that, and my marketing plan is how that selling progresses. Okay. Now you have to understand how valuable in perpetuity means, because that means that contract I have with Idea Grow in Columbia. Now this is all assuming they're in business. Now they're a very successful company. They're headed up by a man that's well known throughout the Southern Hemisphere organization that provides for excellent professional notices and membership by experienced, formally educated professionals in various categories of business. It's an organization. If you check out the managing director of Idea Grow and look at his credentials, you'll see that he is one of the top performers in that organization, and it is a speaker that speaks for that organization. So this is a top flight company. So any company can go out of business. All right. There's no guarantee that when you're in business, even if you're successful, you're going to stay in business. But you have to, when you're doing business, if you're successful and you're being managed by a professional that's experienced and has a proven track record and has created the success the company enjoys, there's no reason to think that company's going to go out of business. So, yeah, you can sit on the sidelines and you can carpet this. Well, yeah, it's in perpetuity as long as the company's there that you got the in perpetuity benefit from. Well, if you want to be that narrow-minded, and silly, and stupid, sit over there on the sidelines and carp at it. You know what? I could care less. But the logic and the rationale that I just presented a moment ago is this: there's no reason to think Idea Grow is going to go out of business. They're very successful. They've expanded. They plan to expand. And coming into the United States, they have every reason to believe that I'm going to be successful in selling a lot of silo presses here, which is going to help their profit situation more and more and more, and they're going to expand more and more and more and be more and more successful. It's going to allow them to expand in other parts of the world and so on and so forth, blah, blah, blah. So that's the deal. Now, see, what the thing is, the in perpetuity agreement that I have for marketing exclusively the silo press that Idea Grow in Columbia manufactures. That's ideagrow.com. IDEAGRO.com. All right. And the US marketing arm is ideagrowusa.com. Okay. So you go to that, you go to my website, you go to ideagrow.com, you go to their website, their company, you can see all their products, and you can see the videos and so on and so forth. So when I negotiated this deal, I've been negotiating this deal for a long time, years, with the Idea Grow manager. Uh, I don't know why it's taken as long as it took. I've got all the emails that we exchanged back and forth going back to 2012. So you figure that out. That's 6 years now. I've been getting ready to do this thing. Okay. And but that's one thing about SAS. He is. Uh, I stick to my program. In other words, I'm persistent. I'm pervasively persistent. I don't give up. People that give up don't understand that when they give up, they could have been just a centimeter away from being successful. If they've been trying and trying and trying and they finally give up, how do they know that they're just not a centimeter away from all of a sudden breaking through and have all the success that they were dreaming about and working for? See, so the concept is you never give up. The minute you give up, what? You're defeated. But if you never give up, you're not defeated. Now you may not be successful, but they can't say you're defeated. Again, the people on the sidelines, the stupids, the silly people, the dummies, the negative. Vice President Agnew said the negative nabobs of negativism. Uh, uh, Limousine liberal negative nabobs of negativism. These are all the people that they can't see the success for the success because the success blinds them. The reason it blinds them is because they're negative people to begin with. It doesn't matter how good something is, there's always a but. There's always a but. Or they're always pointing to some reason why it's not as good as what it looks like it is. See, if something's good, it's good. Now it may be good in different for different people in different ways, but that's another deal. See, that's another level of understanding and application of the concept of good. It's either good or it's bad. All right. Now, people say, well, there's no such thing as black and white. There isn't? Well, all you got to do is look at the color spectrum. And then when you do that, you see all of a sudden, with light cometh color. Depends on where the light's shining and how it's shining, isn't it? Doesn't it? That's right. So, anyway, back to exclusive access value. See, the thing with import, uh, the thing I was yapping about on the other video up above this one yesterday, and the reason it went so long is you can't just throw this idea out there and expect people to understand it the first time because they just don't have a frame of reference for it. You have to live. People get this idea because they hear something once or they read it once, they understand it, and because they think they understand it when they read it or hear it, that they're not going to forget it. Well, that's not true. You know, the old story is you use what you know or you lose it. Yeah, look, if you keep using your thinking that you have, that's the real you, that's your thinking. The real you is not the biological body you're running around in. That just happens to be the way the skin stretched over your skeleton. That's that's a representative of your biological body. That's all that is. But the real you is what you think. And you're not able to think past the content of your vocabulary. So the fewer words that you know, and you're no inculcated in an inculcated way, that means you've heard them so much you can't forget them. It's not a question of memory because there's short-term memory and there's long-term memory, and then there's memory that's long-term that you can't forget. That means you've heard it so much, it's in your long-term memory, and it's in there in a way that you can't forget it. And whenever circumstances that interrelates to any one of the connected ideas related to that connected idea that is inculcated, that inculcation pops up. It's just something you can't forget. Now, in order to get to that stage of memories, uh, and connect it to vocabulary, you got to have an expanded vocabulary. Now, when you hear me talk, you might hear some words that you typically don't hear, and like in perpetuity, or the difference between exclusive and and unique. Okay, the difference. I maybe hear the two words, but do you understand the difference? See, like I've explained what the difference is. Exclusive is the opposite of inclusive, and unique is one of a kind. Okay, there's nothing like it. So when you know something is unique, and if you're the kind of person that says, "Well, there's nothing unique," then you're a sideliner. See, you're one of them people that sits off on the sidelines, hasn't ever had an original idea in their life, and simply is sitting over there all their life, complaining, negative comments, running things down, doing everything they can, and they're very clever about hiding all that thought operation, because they want to be thought of as knowledgeable. See, so they present all this negative stuff in a way that they think makes sense to people. And since there's so many people that are negative nabobs, when you get these evangelists that are negative nabobs, they start to collect up in groups, and then that's where you get real action going out there on the varying and changing circumstances of life that involve groups of people, because then their negative ideas have impact on the rest of us that have positive ideas, and are continually persevering and pressuring to go ahead for good, for the good. And typically, if you know what you're doing, if you're not doing your good that affects everybody, then your good is not good. It's selective, and that it's self-serving, and it's not the opposite of capitalism. Okay, a lot of people think capitalism is bad, but capitalism is plant a seed, get 10, and the reason you get 10 is so that more people can enjoy the planting of one seed. The concept of capitalism is not to plant a seed to get 100 and then turn around and plant the 100 to get so many more seeds. That's not the idea. See, people think that's what, and that's why these big companies are off on in the weeds, because that's the way they operate. They think capitalism is they plant a seed, get 100 back, and then their executives are so stupid that they think, well, dude, now we got 100 seeds we can plant, and we can get 10,000 back. See, and then we'll get 10,000, and we'll plant them, and we'll get to 10 million back. And the more we get back, the better we say we're doing. See, which is all false. That's not right, because and that always catches up with companies that operate that way. Eventually, it might take them a long time. It took this national brand that's been around 100 years, took them over 100 years to fail, and now they're in bankruptcy. So there's something going on there that wasn't good. There's something going on there that was bad. Now, when it switched over during the time it was good and it grew and it was serving a lot of people, this is a household brand name. It served a lot of people. A lot of people. I bought my first, when I got married in 1958, I bought my first hi-fi stereo from this company. I think it was this company. No, maybe not. Maybe it was an appliance. But I know I bought my first air conditioner dehumidifier combination from this company. It was a window unit. It was a big one. And it was from this company. It had their brand on it. And that was back in I think 1958 or maybe 1959. I don't know, one or the other. Anyway, but you see, there's the biggest company, and we've seen this recently. Some of the biggest companies in business today are failing and falling by the wayside, and it's because they don't have a good grasp. Their executives don't have a good grasp on how capitalism really works. Okay, capitalism is not for the few. Capitalism is for everybody, and the more capitalism you have, the more people enjoy the benefits of capitalism. And don't let any negative nabound sitting on the sidelines that doesn't know straight up from straight down tell you any different. If they start preaching about how capitalism is criminal and all this crap they say, well then right there you have suspect, because tell me what other country in the United States has been as successful as our country has been. Yeah, are we perfect? No, we're not perfect. We're not perfect. No country's perfect. The reason why? No people are perfect. That's the reason why no country's perfect. It's pretty simple, isn't it? I mean, it's just a matter of common sense. The problem is there isn't much common sense left anymore. The last 30, 40 years, common sense went out the window. Uh, uh, it's uh, it's called dipsicos. It's called double-mindedness. Anyway, back to Avabog and get to preaching, and that's a bad situation. People get turned off when you preach, unless you're preaching the kind of thing they like to listen to and suck up, uh, like uh, like if you do things a certain way that I tell you to do them, you're going to get all rich and you're going to get all kinds of blessings and blah 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 blah. And be careful and don't do this and don't do that, because if you do, then you won't get any blessings. Blah 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 blah. They're under every rock. They're in some of the biggest organizations around that preach that crap. So anyway, so you got all kinds of people, right? So back to Avabog, unique, exclusive. My agreement with Idea Grow. Now, why is it so fantastic? Well, again, you gotta go slow with this now, because it's not something you're going to pick up immediately. Now, the silo press is a machine that I didn't invent it, but I introduced it in the United States. In terms of, I didn't introduce it; it was imported by a man whose first name was Leo, and he was a harvester salesman, one of those big blue silos you see out in the country. And he knew that he knew he had a good product, because it helped save feed on farms so they could feed it to animals and increase the amount of cash income over just selling the crop, because you run it through the animals. The animals produce meat or milk, and in the terms of the growing animals, the beef they produce, you sell the beef after they're mature, and that they didn't have when you started feeding them, and you fed them the farm crops and similar crops, and then when you fed them, you sold them, you got more for them than if you had just sold the crop that you grew, and that's how they make more money on a farm than if they just sell the crop. The ones that do it that way, the dairy farmers, same way. But Leo was the star of harvest store salesman. And that's those blue machines, and they'd harvest. The farmers would buy these, and they'd put them up on their farm, and they harvest their crop, and they'd bring it home, and they blow it up in this long, big, tall blue silo, and then they had an unloader at the bottom that unloaded the silage that come out the bottom. And the reason they bought the blue is because that blue thing limited. It had an airbag up in the top, and it limited the amount of oxygen that could come in there. And oxygen is where aerobic bacteria can grow. And when aerobic bacteria are growing, whenever there's any nutrients in whatever's around where the where the aerobic bacteria are, it starts feeding on those nutrients. And so poof, those nutrients are gone. Well, the farmer doesn't want that, so that's why they bought the blue tube, because it limited the amount of aerobic bacteria that could live inside of that, because it kept exchanging the air and blowing it out. We were using this it was a brilliant system. They got in trouble because they called it oxygen free in the early beginning, or they intimated it was, and somebody took them to task legally on that, and they lost, and therefore they had to call it oxygen limiting after that, because it wasn't oxygen free. If you stop and think about that, you'd understand that every time you opened the door, it wasn't oxygen free anymore, even if it was when the doors were closed. Okay, but you had to open the door to feed the stuff that was inside. So you see, it comes back to common sense. It was a false grab at trying to get an advantage on selling their blue tubes, and they caught up with them, and they had to fess up to it, and government made them wait a minute, it's not oxygen free. You're going to have to call it oxygen limiting, which it was. So there's no problem anymore. And it still was better than pounding it on the ground, or making, or letting the hay dry out in the field. And then when you harvested it with it mechanically harvested, you shook all the leaves off of the stem of the alfalfa plant. That's where 90% or 75% of the nutrients are, is in the leaves. So they couldn't figure out why they feed this baled hay, and it didn't. They still had to add a bunch of protein to it. Well, that was pretty easy to figure out. And that's why the big round bales are better, but they still shake off a lot of the limb. And they claim they don't, the machines that do it, but they do. And then even now they've got, because of the silo press that I introduced, is in terms of selling the first one. Now, Leo bought the first three from Germany, but I bought those from him, and then I turned around and sold those to a farmer. So I sold the first silo press 401 from Eberhard, the Bruder Eberhard Company in Germany, that invented it and had a patent on it, U.S. patent. I did. It wasn't Leo. Leo didn't sell it. I sold it. I bought them from him that he bought, and then I turned around and sold it. And it's because of my experience, because of my background, knowledge of sales management, distribution, marketing, which by that time, that was 1976. You see, by that time, I started out, say, give or take, at 20 years old. So 20 years old, and that would have been roughly 1960. So by the time I bought that silo press from Leo, those silo presses from Leo, and sold it to the farmer and made a dealer out of him, because I knew the farmer wasn't going to sell any more of them, and that's what I wanted done. And he was a well-known farmer, a wealthy farmer, well-known in the area, successful, had a successful name, had a successful feed business, had a successful cattle feeding operation. So I knew that I could play on that popularity of his name and the experience that people looked up to sell more silo presses. So I pitched him on taking a dealership and 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 uh, and sold him on. He says, "Well, I don't know anything about selling farm equipment." And I said, "Well, how about if I make a contract with you and I'll act as your sales manager and I'll sell the machines I sell to you for you and you get the commission." And I, of course, in the deal, I made a little side agreement that I got a commission on selling his machines besides my distributor commission. Okay, because that's not it's no more than fair. So that's how the first dealer got set up with silo press. And you don't know what a silo press is maybe right now, and I'll get into that because you got to know what that is. Otherwise, none of this makes any sense. All right, and the uniqueness you don't understand, you couldn't understand. All right, so uh, the silo press was unique. All right, there wasn't anything like it. That's why it was so curious. That's why farmers were so curious about it and interested about it. And when the way that I marketed it in, I put on demonstrations, which is not anything I created. Demonstration selling has been around since whenever. But I realized that farmers had to see this thing work. You couldn't just tell them about it. You could show them a video and that would help. But if you could get them to a farm where you could actually run the thing and show them how that thing packed silage back through that tunnel, and it come in the front, chopped in the field, brought it back to the machine, dumped it in the machine in the front, and pushed it through the back. The silo press rotor that had the fishtail the conical fishtail rotor on it through the middle of it. And as it turned around, it picked the silage up, pushed it through a shaping tunnel, shaped it into an 8-foot mass, and then shoved it out the back. And as I explained in the video up above this one last time, the last video, there was a net frame with a net on it that was attached to two cables on either side that were attached to either side of the silo press. It was on wheels, and you said there were two brakes there where the cable was rolled up. And you'll see pictures of the silo press so you can understand the orientation to that operation. And you set that brake to a certain pressure, and when you had pushed enough, and there was a bag on the back of it, you put the plastic bag on the back of the shaking tunnel, and you pulled it off, and you tied it off with that end, and then when the machine reached a certain density, approximately a ton to a linear foot, then the brake slipped and the machine moved ahead and make room for more silage to be pushed back in the bag. When you got all done, there was 100 foot of packed silage in that bag. So then he took the machine off, tied the end of the bag off, and within a few hours, all the anaerobic bacteria had died off because there was no more oxygen. And then what happens when there's no oxygen and there's nutrients? There's millions of bacteria on that silage plant that had come in from the field. And it's there. It's operating within the cell structure of the plant that is what? Anaerobic, right? It functions uh, through the process of the sunlight and photosynthesis and all that. But inside that plant, where that bacteria is in there to help that operation, and it's operating within a anaerobic environment. And when you cut the plant, the the idea here in rot or when something uh, is destroyed through rotting, can't think of the word right now, but when you cut the plant, when the plant starts to die, it respires. It respires. Heat is generated from the respiration. All those anaerobic bacteria are killed off. See, and so then the aerobic bacteria can go to work on it and get rid of it. Otherwise, we'd be up to over our head in trash and rot, more than over our head. You couldn't live if the bacteria weren't rotting things that needed to be rotted. So it's just a wonderful thing of nature. It's the way it works. But inside that bag now, when you close that bag off, and more oxygen can get in. So you've got the anaerobic bacteria; they're all gone. They're gone. So now the aerobic bacteria that are still there, that haven't all respired, because the idea is, and this is part of the management of cutting silage. Once you cut that silage in that field, you don't jack around, let it sit in the wagon for 3 days before you take it back, try to fix it somehow and store it, or even 10 minutes, or 5 minutes longer. The idea is you want to get that once it's cut from that roots and that soil. The idea is you get that cut silage back to wherever you're going to store it and however you're going to store it as fast as you can and within the law. And but you don't dally around, because the longer the minute you cut that plant starts to respire. That's a rot process that sets in. It's just like well, you get the idea. So it's A&E. You know what that is? It's A&E, boy. When you get A&E, when you get that plant cut, get that stuff back to that silo press and get it run through that machine, and get that machine packed it up to a ton to the foot, and that's where it's pushing all the oxygen out at that as it goes ahead. And then you get that bag full as fast as you can, because you're bringing in new silage that's been cut, brought right to that machine as part of the management process of that cutting and silo press operation, field chopping and silo press hauling, and field silo press processing operation of the forage that you're dealing with. And remember, that's money. That's what you're dealing with. There is actually cash in your hands. And you got to save all that cash that you can by efficiently harvesting the crop, getting it back to the farmstead, hauling it back, and getting it unloaded in an efficient way, in a rapid way, and get it through the silo press in a rapid way. The silo press is packed more feed than most farmers can haul to it, unless they have more wagons and choppers than they can afford. But I mean, this was always the big thing back in the 70s. These people that I set up as dealers, I talked about that first one. It was an 8-foot machine, and it was powered by a 40 horsepower tractor. And of course, this guy was a big farmer, and it might sound like I'm being down on him. I'm not being down on him. He was a top notch operator, a top notch manager, top notch successful person. But as a result, he could only see doing things one way, in the big way. See, that's it. Because people that are successful, and they form a frame of reference. The way they think, there's only one way to do it, and that's the way I do it. Because look at here, I'm successful. I made money. I know what I'm doing. See, and so my way is the right way. Well, it may be, and it may not be. It depends on the circumstances, doesn't it? And the circumstances, as far as he was concerned at the time with the silo press, that was powered by a 40-foot tractor, and it was an 8-foot bag, and he didn't want a 40-foot tractor powering the machine. He thought if you put a 150 horsepower tractor on it and made the machine 12-foot or 14-foot, so it used a 12 or 14-foot bag, that was better, because it would impress the big farmer like him more. And that was the whole concept, and that's what happened. It took several years for it to happen, but that's what happened. And that's nobody can argue with that because that's history, and I lived every minute of it. I know because I was involved in it. And the silo press was not designed for the big farmers. Gruber Eberhard in Germany did not design and patent that silo press for big farmers in Germany. Germany, that is just like America. There's a far more small farmers than there are big farmers in any country. It's far more businesses that are big than there are, far more businesses that are small in any country than there are that are big ones. So it's always been a curious thing to me why people always want to run out and sell to big companies. Being a salesman, I like to sell where I got the most prospects possible. That's just common sense, isn't it? But I recruited and hired salesmen all the time. The first thing they wanted to do was what they were selling. I told them to sell. They wanted to go out and sell the big accounts. I said, look, uh, I had a sales manager that was been around for 40 years, and this was in 1960. 1960, 1961, a national company with a regional the division manager. Been around with that company 40 years. He was division manager, lived in Omaha. At the time I lived in Kearney, Nebraska, but he said something to me one time that has stuck with me forever. I mean, as till today, and that was what 50, almost 60 years ago. He says, "Look, you sell a big account, and you got one big account, but you sell 100 small accounts, and you got 100 small accounts. Now, if you're selling anything, you got competition. So when you got competition and they're out there selling on what you've sold against you and your customers that you've sold, and they clip off a big account, you lost a lot of business, didn't you? But if they're only successful and because you gave your customers good service and you gave them good customer care after the sale, so it was difficult for them to get very many of those. But let's say they get 20% of them, you still got 80% of them left, and that 80% will always be far more sales than that one big account that you lost. But if you've got nothing but big accounts and your competition starts winnowing those down, guess what happens? Your pocketbook starts to shrink because your income becomes less. So it's always been curious. Now, I like to sell big accounts just like anybody else, and I have. But when it comes down to selling, my experience told me after years that it was always better to look for a product or service that I could sell to everybody right down the street than as if I had to go spend a week lining up 5 people to go call on that week, the next week, and sell them a big deal one a day. Whereas if I went right down the street, maybe I could sell 5, 10 a day. So to me, and I always did real well in selling most of the time, not always, but most of the time. And so my thinking must have been at least it satisfied me. And frankly, I didn't give a damn whether it satisfied him or anybody else agreed with me or not because they weren't running my life. I was. So but all right, back to Avabog, back to Unique, back to Exclusive, back to silo press. All right, now we got the silo press, and I'm uh, importing them from South America Idea Grow in Colombia. Okay, now uh, if I've got an exclusive contract on sales in the United States for a company, so the reason I've got an exclusive is so when I go out and spend all my time building up the business for this company, and then after I get a lot of customers and I get a lot of sales and I get everything going for them, and somehow or the other, the contract that I've got with them runs out because while it's exclusive, is somehow or another tied to performance or some other way that they have of stopping that contract. So it's not exclusive anymore. Then they turn around and they say, now look, if you still want If you still want to buy and sell this for us, well, that's fine. The thing is, we're going to get you some help. See, we're going to go out here and we're going to get some more people like you because we need to expand. See, you're not capable of expanding fast enough. See, but that was never in the original deal. That that that's the way companies do that to salespeople that perform for them, and then they cut their cut their legs out from under them. Shame on them. It's almost criminal. It is immoral at the best, or at the least. But it's almost criminal when they do that kind of. But it's a common practice. As salesmen that got any experience at all know not to get themselves into that kind of a situation because it'll happen sure as the world. And they'll cut your legs right out from underneath you, and they'll get you some help. And that, what does that mean? The argument is, well, when we get you some help, you don't have to run all over everywhere selling. You can concentrate on a smaller area and make more sales. Well, that might be true, but the idea in if you're smart and know what you're doing, if you've got an exclusive, you know what you're doing, you can go out and get your own help and pay them smaller commission than you get and give them most of it, but you still get a little bit. They call that an override. Okay. So I do the same thing that they do, except that I get the benefit of what I started instead of them cutting my legs out from underneath me, and so they get the benefit of what I started. See, so I'm cool on that. I was aware of that, and that's why I negotiated with the Idea Grow in South America. And the board understood this, otherwise, and they know what kind of background I have. They know what I did with the silo press, sold $15 million worth the first 3 years they were in the United States. They knew all that. They can look at history. They're not dummies. They're not sitting on the board because they're stupid. And Angel brought him my proposal. And look, if I'm going to build the business in the United States for silo press, and I've got a business plan, and you know I can do it because here's my track record, not just with silo press, but throughout my sales career, a top 10% evidence. It can be checked. If I'm going to do all that, then I want an in perpetuity exclusive marketing sales agreement for silo press in the United States, which means the contract never ends. Contract never ends. Now, how can that be? You're not going to go out. They're smart enough to know though. The answer to that is, and I put it right in the agreement that all right, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to continue forever, but my estate is going to continue forever. My estate and my estate you're as a company are going to recognize this in perpetuity agreement as me, which is represented by my estate administrator, which is a legal process. And that estate is the same thing in the will that's written up by me that when I pass, the operation of that agreement continues on and is administered by the state administrator appointed by me in my will. And it's the same as them doing business with me, except I'm gone now and they're doing business with the administrator. And beyond that, I've got the agreement written in a way that allows me to subdivide that agreement down to people that I'm going to recognize as authorized to have the same benefits that I have, so that when they pass, their agreement is in perpetuity as well. And when they pass, their estate can administer it. They can appoint an administrator and appoint if they want to keep it going in their family, or if they want to sell it, they've got the right to sell it because they have that right as exclusive in perpetuity subdivided part of my agreement. Okay, so now you're starting to get a little bit of an inkling about Avabog. Is it starting to click? Is the wheels starting to creak and grind up there in your gray matter? Avabog, asset value, access, business, organization, group. See, because there's no dealer agreements that are in perpetuity. So if there isn't, and if it's that kind of an agreement, and if the silo press is in demand as much as it is, and you have to understand the background of this. The silo press that I sold the first one of in the middle 70s, today in 2018 is a billion, multi hundreds of millions of dollars worth of global business. The plastic alone runs in the projected out to be out is currently in the billions, but it's projected. If you just go and search it on the internet, silage bags are projected in the plastic business, that category of plastic extrusion. Silage bags is projected to grow at a phenomenal rate in the future. Why? Well, unfortunately, it's taken all these decades for people to wake up out in the country that this is the way to feed cattle and dairy animals. See, you don't change generations of doing things a certain way on a farm in a generation. You just don't do it. They're not built that way. They don't think that way. And I learned that. That's why I was smart enough to go after the early adopters. I didn't fart around with the guy that wanted to argue with me. I didn't have time for that. I understood because he was generationally fixed in his thinking. His dad did it this way, and that's the way he's going to do it, by God. Well, it run a lot of them kind of people out of business. But that's their business. It had nothing to do with me. And I didn't fault them for it. They want that kind of an attitude. Unfortunately, now, because of years past and because of a lot of good science that's been done on land grant colleges in the agriculture field by animal scientists and agronomy scientists, we've come to learn some of these things that the younger farmers, because of education and so forth, are grasping and have grasped onto, say, the last 10, 20 years. And so things creakingly are moving ahead. But when you think about farming, what it's like today and what it was like 200 years ago, well, you'd have thought, but the stuff that's happening today has been available the last 50, 60, 70 years in this country, but it wasn't really adopted and put. I worked for a man. Now, this is an off story, but it's an interesting one because it's just a perfect example of how farmers, uh, because of various factors, farmers had a gold mine in their hands, and not enough of them realized it before the big company covered the gold mine up with a lot of baloney and took advantage of the concept and the ideas that the gold mine was promoting. And as a result, most of the farmers never learned about the gold mine. All they learned about was the cover up of the big operation company, the big brand that sells farm equipment, and told them the best way. Their disc was the best disc there was. But Miller Manufacturing Company that started out in Southwest Nebraska back in the early '60s, built a machine that was a soil tillage machine. A soil tillage machine, not a disc. It looked like a disc. It has disc blades that were shaped a certain way, and it looked like a disc, but it wasn't as wide as a disc. And there was a reason for that, because if you went any wider and as deep as it was, the blades were 36 inches high, and they were curved a certain way, and on either side of the gang. So they were curved in on the one side of the gang, and they were curved in on the other side of the gang, opposite curve. And it was a soil tillage machine. And he was a smart. Uh, Miller was a smart man. I guarantee you, he was a smart. He was a genius, and he created this idea and this concept of deep tillage, deep soil tillage, and then driving that. The machine was say 8 foot wide, and then pulled it by a reasonably powerful tractor. And after you harvested the crop, he pulled that machine through the field after all that crop stalks were left over and they were dry and cellulose. He went through the field one time in the fall, and he took that and that deep 18 inches that disc went down in the ground as he went through there, and he had the ability to control hydraulically the tilt of the bed of the deep tillage machine in a way that aggressively attacked the soil as it went through to help pull it through, and it went down in the soil. And the reason why the disc blades were conical the way they were is that they went down in there, and the speed that he was riding and the angle of attack on the soil. What his concept was, he exploded the soil. It wasn't like the moldboard plow that went through and turned over a big slab. It laid on top of the ground and forced the oxygen out, and laid there through the winter, and then in the spring when it thawed out, they went back over it with farm machines to break up those clods and everything. Well, this machine did all that, but it did it in the fall, right after the harvest, and it cut all, and the blades were sharp, and when it went through the field, it cut all that stalks up into uniform pieces, and it exploded the soil and brought the soil up, and it grabbed those pieces and pushed, and then as the machine moved through aggressively at the right attack angle, it put all that uniform pieces of cellulose back down in the soil profile 18 inches. And there it sat through the winter. And what happens in the spring when it warms up and the moisture trickles down in there and the anaerobic bacteria go to work on it? And what do they create? And we call it, the farmers know what that is called. That's called humus. That's life in the soil. All right. And so if that machine created a lot of nutrients to grow the next crop, all right. And so then in the spring, you still had that once through in the fall, and in the spring you went back through with your planting machine. You didn't worry about all the rigmarole that chemical companies tell them they got to worry about today. And there's reasons why they got to worry about it, and they better worry about it. They better do something about it. But with Miller's operation, you didn't do all that. You just went through there with the planter and planted. And all that power of life that was created by bacteria in the soil from those uniform pieces of cellulose that were from that crop plant that were pulled down in the soil, that was still highly digestible. That cellulose, uh, uh, dried out crop plant, after they took the seed off of it, that corn plant was highly digestible yet. So not highly, but it was digestible. There were nutrients there, and the combination of warmth, bacteria, and moisture in the spring broke all that down and made it available to plants, that seeds that were planted down in that soil profile. Now, what does that all mean? That means that you don't have to put as much fertilizer on it to help the plant grow up to maximum yield. And maybe it wouldn't be maximum yield, but you had less cost. And you remember when I was talking about whatever cost is involved depends on whether you're going to be able to get a profit or not, because the seed's only going to be worth so much. Whatever the market is, that's all you're going to get. So if you have less cost, if you bought less fertilizer and produced the seed, and whatever the seed price is, if you've got less price, you're going to make more money than the guy that's put on a lot of fertilizer. He got more seed, but he had more cost when he sold it. Now he might have sold more volume, but that didn't make him a higher percentage of profit. That just made him more profit off of what he did sell because he sold more. But what happened was Miller sold them things like by the truckload, because he had salespeople that went out and told the story I just told you. See, and they put on meetings in small towns, and they told people about this, farmers about this, and the farmers that were smart enough and weren't bogged down by generational uh, uh, thinking lock, wouldn't do anything new if their life depended on it. They just wouldn't do it. That's just not the way they thought. But there's always early adopters in everything. There's always people that are aware. They're on the lookout. And they're new things that they are attracted to, because it makes sense to them, and they latch onto it, and they get the thing going. And so there were enough of those that Miller sold. them soil deep tillage soil machines in the 60s and 70s, like they were, and even in the early 80s, like they were going out of style. Truckload after truckload after truckload left his plant, and it made a lot of money. But there's a bigger company. He's just a small company. He's a very small in a small southwestern town. You look up the history, you find it. But there's one big, there's two or three big farm equipment companies, isn't there? There's one really big one. Everybody knows that name. And they got to look at Morrison, what he was doing with the tillage program. And here they were trying to sell that little 8-inch disc. And it couldn't do what his machine could do. So they had to do something, and they had to do it in a way that made that deep tillage tool made people forget about it. And they did. I mean, now you see discs that are white, almost as white as the field is, and the tractors, 4-wheel drive tractors. Boy, they love that when they can sell those ideas to these farmers, because they sold them on the idea that you can't go through the machine with an 8-foot disc. They called it a disc, and it wasn't a disc. It's a lie to call it a disc because it wasn't a disc. Didn't do what a disc does. All a disc does is profile the top 4 inches of the soil, and it doesn't even profile anything that they're disking. All it does is profile the soil, and it's no good to profile the soil unless you can pull that cellulose down in the soil. And so it's a shame on that big company for ruining the future for farmers, because if they left Miller alone, and if they hadn't have lied about why his machine was not the way to go, and sold against it with a little 8-inch disc, and then added gangs onto it with the idea that, look, if you use an 8-foot disc, you're going to have to go over your field 90 times before, and you ain't got that kind of time before you got a plant. Remember, you got to plant a certain time in order to mature at a certain time in the fall. So you ain't going to get nothing done with an 8-foot disc. You got to have a 24, 36-foot disc. See, you got to have a big tractor to pull it so you can get that done. So you can get out there and plant that corn. See, well, a lot of them, little squeaky farmer type negative neighbor generational lock farmers, they sat there and said, well, this is a big outfit, the biggest farm equipment company in the business. They know what they're talking about. Yeah, they know what they're talking about. A way to get Miller's business away from him. That's what they knew how to do. Their corporate people sitting back in their office wasn't so dumb. But you know what it did was it sidetracked this country's crop production. That's what it did. And I don't care whether you agree with that or not. I know the facts. And there's a lot of other associated things related to deep tillage that have had to occur after the 8-foot disc cut hold and the big 36-foot wide gangs that are whatever, however wide and longer, even wider, even. Instead of farming 18 inches of the soil, they're farming 4 inches of it. And think of the nutrients that got to be piled on there, chemical wise, in order to grow a crop in the top 4 inches of the soil. Just think of that. Remember, I told you about costs and how it affects profit. And the only way that you can get around that is do more volume. And that's why we've got all the corporate farms, or it's one big reason why we do. I don't know. None of this is, I know you're not able to follow any of this. I know that. Except a few of you, and I'm only looking for a few of you. I only need a few. I don't need everybody. Thank God for that. If I needed everybody, I'd quit. You don't need everybody when you're selling. You only need to hunt and find a way to center up on the ones that'll listen to you and act on what you tell them to do. if you've got a solid story that's logical and can be tested, you don't have to jump in with both feet at first. But I know what the story is on the deep tillage disc. Okay, I know what it is, and I know why. Today we got problems with corporate farming, and that's one of the reasons. Now there's other reasons. There's other reasons, but I'll tell you what. If you could have back in the '60s, if you could have kept the small farmers progressing, and if people that used that deep tillage tool and realized they had to put less fertilizer in because of the 18-inch soil profile was creating more humus and life in the soil that created the next crop every year, so they were making more money. If that concept would have spread out to more and more and more small farmers, uh, who outnumbered the big farmers by a factor of 20,000 to 1, this will be an altogether different farming company. And if the government had kept their fingers out of it with this subsidy deal they got going in order to control the prices, which is a you took well, I won't get into that one. Well, I've been talking for an hour here, and I hope I've started to introduce Avabog and exclusive, unique import group USA. And I'll have another video that will continue to expound on this and explain more in detail why this is something that a few of you are definitely going to want to get involved in. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.